Hello and welcome to the Workplace Confidence Podcast. I'm Penny Haslam, and in this episode, what is a gender pay gap action plan and how do you create one? At the time of recording, April 2026, employers with 250 or more employees are being encouraged to publish what they're doing to close their gender pay gap and support employees experiencing menopause. The expectation is this may become mandatory in 12 months' time. So joining me to demystify this is friend of the podcast, Gillie Fairbrother. She is the Global Responsible Business Officer at Davies, a global professional services and technology company. And it's Gillie's job to oversee ESG. So this strongly fits in her wheelhouse, as we might say. She calls herself the Air Traffic Controller for Responsible Business. Please welcome to Gillie. Gillie, hello.
So great to be back, Penny. Thank you for having me.
Good. It's an absolute pleasure. You were always a dream to talk with, I have to say. So I knew you would be a brilliant person to help us understand what this kind of new voluntary aspect of the Employment Rights Act has changed to. Can you just give us a bit of an outline as to what the changes are, what's expected now of companies?
Totally. And of course, not just from a professional standpoint am I interested in this topic, but personally, as a woman, they're topics that are very close to my heart and I have a vested interest in us improving in this space. So very happy to talk about this. And as you mentioned, UK regulation that's coming in or legislation that's coming in for companies of 250 or more employees to step up their action. So they've been reporting for a while now on their gender pay gap, but now the expectation is to explain what it is they're going to do to make a difference here, which I think will be really interesting.
Yeah. So what do you think people will be reporting upon, and how will we know if it's of any quality, what they've put down as their action plan? I mean, it might be 3 sentences like we held a seminar, we sent out a pamphlet, and there's a portal on the website to help. I mean, what's going to constitute as great?
Yeah. And we've talked about this before. I think there's the expectation to report isn't changing. So I don't think anyone should turn around and think, this is something that we've known about. And probably if people are actually reading their reports, they should have really been thinking for a while now, what are we doing to change this? And I think what the government is looking for are those key drivers that explain that gender pay gap. So what do these numbers really mean and why are they where they are? Committing to concrete action. So what are you doing? And I think we'll probably get into a little bit later about how do you link that action to change in your gender pay gap? But also identifying accountability. Do you have senior leaders, or is this a report that's happening and being pumped out from your HR system, but no one in leadership is really aware of what these reporting requirements are, what the risks are around not seeing any change in these numbers. So that I think that's where we're stepping from just a reporting requirement to a need to make some action.
Yeah, and I would imagine it brings issues like reputation into focus. And also, if you are a company that's maybe looking for private equity investment, how does your ESG rating look? And, there's a bit more detail under the bonnet now, isn't there, with the action plan reporting. Have you got anything to say about those sorts of risks for companies and if that sharpens everyone's minds a little bit more?
Absolutely. And this is something we're assessed on a daily basis, whether that be through a client bid, an RFP, an investor assessment. A lot of companies using rating agencies like EcoVadis, which their clients mandate, that directly ask us questions about this.
Well, every day they're interested.
Every day our team is dealing with particularly client RFPs and audits and things, but then we have our annual reporting cycle. EcoVadis is annually, our investors are annual. So we're sort of trying to streamline our reporting so we can actually get involved in action and doing. But as the more legislation grows, the more questions we ask, because people will throw that into their assessment as well. And I think it really will be about, what are you doing now and can you explain this? My worry is that those gender pay gap reports have been on our websites now as UK companies for quite a long time. And I think it always surprises me that when an employee is going to look at a company, or employees are already at a company, don't go and look at that and be quite angry about it and demand that change. I hope this will move into a shift to action, but unfortunately, that reporting won't change. It's still there. It's been there the whole time. So hopefully, it won't get lost in the fact that no one's looking at it and asking for answers.
Yeah, I mean, coming as a background in the media, I always thought it was heavily underreported.
Totally.
The gender pay gap and the reporting and the numbers that were there for all to see. It's just sort of accept, that's how it is, isn't it? I mean, I find it interesting how you can follow, mark, track is the word, track impact from the action to closing the gender pay gap. I mean, one tiny experience I've had is working with a bank to help a cohort of women communicate with more confidence, be able to sort of stand up in front of the board, have impact, influence, thinking about their careers, etc. We didn't set out to close the gender pay gap, because that would have felt like a lot of pressure. But we tracked those women's progress, career progress. And guess what? A year later, 4 out of the 6 of them had all got promotions.
Amazing.
Which, I take as a massive badge of honour. Yeah, go me, whatever, but go them especially. And it's, had I not been in touch with all of them beyond that intervention, that short programme that I ran, I wouldn't have known that. And I don't think the bank would have really picked up on it either. And I mean, in the numbers, on the spreadsheets maybe, but is that enough? What do you think needs to happen in terms of tracking and making sure there is actual impact?
Yeah, and I think it is really hard to tie those initiatives. I mean, we work quite strongly with our ERGs on awareness. Having events like International Women's Day are very lovely and raising that awareness, but how they are directly impacting what women are paid. And of course, now we're also bringing into this menopause action plans. So sort of linking those initiatives to how we manage talent, how we look at flexible working. I think it's still very hard to tie that to how you're paying someone. And I think what will come out of this is that people will no longer be able to get away with saying things like, we will consider and we aim to. It's no, well, how are you going to, and how is that going to impact? And I think people will have to work that out. But the fact that we're tying action to the numbers will mean people have to think more strategically about this as an operational capability. It's not just a nice policy that someone's put on a shelf. And I think when it comes to international companies, yes, this is a UK requirement, but if you're now going to start expanding your menopause support for women in the UK, it'd be a really good time to think about what this looks like globally.
Yeah, and do you think global companies have appetite for that as different cultural responses to the gender pay gap, but also to menopause? I mean, it's still a taboo in many areas, isn't it? At least, massively surprising. The United States, perhaps. You mentioned in our briefing call that the US don't really want to mention that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the same for any initiatives across inclusion, things like sustainability and the other areas of my business that I work on, that you're going to get varying appetites, but also varying legislations. Looking at different countries in Europe where you're not allowed to ask certain questions about sexual orientation. And we're not here to force people. What we want to do is create a safe environment where people can disclose if they need support and make sure that support is available for them. I think that would be the approach from the menopause and the gender pay gap, because gender is something that is universal, and we will have that employee base across. So how can you standardise that and use this legislation as a way of implementing best practice across the business?
Yeah. So thinking about cultural backdrop, do you think the UK is ready for greater scrutiny on this topic in terms of its corporate offering and the FTSE 100s, 350s? Do you think it's like going, oh, yeah, brilliant. We haven't been able to close the gender pay gap, but we've managed to put a man on the other side of the moon and,
Yeah, I think your clarification of is the UK ready and linking it to corporate is good, because I do think the UK has come a long way culturally. The things we've seen on television and in the media, the things we've seen advertised on TV are very much demystifying menopause and what that looks like and making it a less taboo topic. And I think that's where corporates need to step into that space. When we talk about these actions and what they are, I think that will be heavily centered around, I don't want to use the word training. I want to use the word, I suppose, discussion with these topics. Quite often these initiatives that advance women have been aimed at women, and they're in a corner and
they're separate.
They're separate. We're actually thinking about how can we upskill team leaders, managers, male team leaders and managers on how they can sort of be less frightened of this topic and actually think, after COVID, the way we work is totally different. Our flexible and hybrid working policies, we know it works. So why should it be any different here? And we want to get the best out of our employees. So how can we support them at a time of need, which means that they're able to give their best when they can.
The last thing that any woman wants is to be promoted for the fact that she's a woman. In my experience of chatting about this with women, it's like, I would rather, poke my own eye with a stick than consider myself to be like a numbers person. Do you think there's a danger of that ultimately I don't know. Is there a danger of that happening ever?
I think we have fallen foul of quotas in the past, and I think that's probably why we're seeing backlash in spaces like America right now. Quite rightly so, we shouldn't be hiring from a quota standpoint. Unfortunately, I think some of these inclusion initiatives have been diminished due to that. But when we're thinking about gender pay gap, it's more about what people are getting paid rather than people getting hired. And I'd worry about how companies are going to manage that. If you had to wave a magic wand and fix it tomorrow, companies wouldn't be able to afford to suddenly pay all their women a lot more. So where is that money coming from?
Yeah.
And we don't want to create a further divide of, it's got to come from somewhere else or someone else.
So let's pay the men less.
It. That's a dangerous space to be going into. Yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken with HR directors who say the real challenge is that they'd love to wave that magic wand and just, put women in the place where they are earning those earning those numbers. But even when they are in those roles, we can't afford necessarily to pay I don't know, it's tricky, dodgy water, isn't it, sometimes? But I got her point. She was in between a rock and a hard place, really. But her board, brilliantly, was supportive of massive dramatic action to help rectify the issue and saw it as a strategic initiative that everybody needed to be concerned about. And I think that's back to your point about the, sort of allies, if you like. I wish we wouldn't. I wish we didn't have to use that word.
I know.
It sounds like it's a choice. It's a strategic problem that needs solving, and everyone needs to be invested and excited about solving that problem, right? How practically could we do that with people? How can we engage people on this topic more? I mean, you spend your days engaging people on the topic of sustainability and viability. How do you do it? Is it a number of moves?
I mean, I suppose if you're thinking about the power of influence, if you want to get anyone to do anything, it's a figuring out what's in it for them. Why would they do it? And in my work, particularly those drivers we've talked about, client RFPs, investor relations, you're finding that driver that will make your business better. I just we have to move away from this. This is a nice thing to do across our initiatives.
For the ladies.
Well, for everything, right? Whether it's trying to improve our impact on the planet, to hiring more women and paying them fairly, it's not a nice thing to do. And looking at, the insurance industry as a whole, if we're thinking that in the next 10 years, 30% of people are going to retire, then we need to be looking at a younger talent pool. How are we attracting them? How are we making sure that they see this industry as a positive place to come, where gender pay gap is not an issue in a perfect world? It's these kind of things which will help us attract that talent and retain the talent that we already have.
Okay, so it's appealing to the people coming up the pipeline. Gen Zs don't want to walk into workplaces where this stuff is hanging over us. It's like no big deal, is it? Gender's a construct, right? So is the gender pay gap. That's just
just sort it out.
Yeah, menopause. That's not actually true, is it? But I think actually on the menopause, Gen Z, next gen people coming through will be, I think, much more aware and take it in their stride, like you've said, on this topic. It's like it's no big deal. We don't have to hide our differences. And yeah, the menopause sets you apart slightly in difference, doesn't it?
And like we've said, it's voluntary at the moment this year with the look for it to become mandatory. But every time this happens with any legislation, there's an opportunity for those early adopters to lower their risk, gain higher trust and stand out from the crowd. And it's really down to the business to decide where they want to sit in that space.
So what would you love to see companies actually doing, in terms of the reporting, this action plan? What would an action plan to you look like for closing the gender pay gap? Reporting on what education you're doing around the menopause and all the rest of it. But let's focus on gender pay gap. What does that look like to you? Does it look fun at all? Does it, is there a kind of...
I mean, I think this is your opportunity as a business to move from purely disclosure to delivery. So let's bring that data to life, understanding why it is the way it is. If you have a large company across multiple different divisions, can you identify hotspots? Am I understanding why this is in certain spaces? So instead of just pumping out the numbers, it's about understanding those numbers and then making really strategic decisions about how you might change that. We've said it's going to be really hard to track some of those initiatives onto the data, but let's try, right? We're not going to get it right. Again, this could get left on your website and no one will look at it, but wouldn't it be a nice opportunity to actually see if we can make a change?
Oh, what a good news story. Yeah, absolutely. Finally, I know that you've worked really hard in the space of, sustainability, and you have a sort of analogy, don't you, with a team that came to you saying, we're always being asked about this issue by our customers. How can we talk to people? Do we need a specialist? And you've worked on developing everyone's knowledge and understanding, haven't you? Do you think that's got a good sort of, explain what that was. And then do you think that would translate or travel well into the other space of gender pay gap stuff?
Totally. And I think, with all these things, because I report on everything we do, quite often it will land in my inbox and people will go, well, this is your thing and you've got to deal with it. Whereas actually, if you think about it, I don't own anything we do. I should just be reporting on it. And we've always been very clear that my team would not be a silo. We don't want to be a business that has a sustainability team or a business that has a culture team working over here on a culture initiative. We want to be a diversely cultured business that is sustainable. So it's really about upskilling everyone and getting everyone involved. And I think one of the places where people do tend to fall at the first hurdle when it comes to culture change is they think it's an HR job.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's everybody's job. And it's everyone who might manage a woman in this instance who might be going through menopause or isn't getting paid as much as her male counterparts. So I think it's that de-siloing of this approach, bringing in as many people as possible. And hopefully that shift from just having the data to having to explain the data will force other teams to get involved in the process.
Brilliant. Everyone needs an air traffic controller in their business, right?
I feel like I need a good uniform, like a special uniform.
You do. And some ping pong table tennis bats.
Yes. Some glow in the dark ones. That would be great.
Gillie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything I've missed that I should have asked you about? As I always love asking that question. I don't want to go away thinking I've got all the information there. I may have missed something. What do you think? What do you think of my interview? Was it all right?
I think your interviews are always fantastic, and you've always got a diverse angle to ask. But I think if I was to say anything, it'd be anyone who's listening to this. Even if you don't think this is your job, is there some way you could make an impact? If you care about this, are you interested? Don't stay in your lane on this. Go outside, talk to people, put pressure on, because without that pressure, nothing will happen.
What are the talking points then? If we're going to say, I want to close the gender pay gap, it's really good for women to be paid more and for everyone. What would you say then? What are the arguments?
Well,
these are the 3 bullet points. You're going to get this, you're going to get this. It's the WIFM issue, isn't it? I know, but...
Yeah. And I mean, there's probably a list as long as your arm, from talent retention to talent attraction to happy employees to people feeling like they feel valued. But if I was a people leader and I had a team of people and I had a gender split and I looked at the salaries, are you aware of how your teams are paid? If you're not, can you go and look? Is there some pattern that you're not happy with or doesn't look right? As I said, get out of your lane and have a look and see if there's something you can do, because it's going to take everyone. So have a go.
Have a go. Magic. Well, thanks so much, Gillie. You really do have a no-nonsense approach to ESG, which is really refreshing. And people and culture is always a fabulous topic to get into. So, we'll welcome you back anytime, basically. Now, I'm just interested to hear from anyone listening who maybe leads people or is a people professional with insights of their own to share. And if that's the case, get in touch. hello@bitfamous.co.uk. Thanks for listening. And Gillie, thank you.
Thank you so much, Penny, for having me. It's been fantastic.